This particular video is about the Sabbath day, Sunday, the first day of the week, referenced in the following scriptures I'm about to quote. The scriptures tell us a few times that the early apostolic church gathered for breaking of the bread, i.e. the Mass, on the first day of the week, which refers to Sunday. On the first day of the week, when we were gathering together to break bread, Paul talked with them, intending to depart on the morrow, and he prolonged his speech until midnight, Acts 20, verse 7, RSV. And then on 1 Corinthians 16, verse 2, the RSV says, on the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up, as he may prosper, so that contributions need not to be made when I come. Since this can be problematic for groups with Judaizing and Sabbath-keeping tendencies like the Seventh-day Adventists, Seventh-day Baptists, and other Judaizing Sabbath-keeping Christian sects, some of their apologists insist that these verses are actually about the Sabbath day, since the Greek word sabbaton, is used, which generally means Sabbaths, or Sabbath, as seen here of the Greek text of Acts 20, verse 7, where you clearly see the word sabbaton being used in the place of week in translations. You see the same thing occurring in 1 Corinthians 16, verse 2, where the word sabbaton also translates the word week. This is virtually every translation. So the rebuttal boils down to this. See, this verse is actually talking about the Sabbath day. It is not referred to week. At first, this rebuttal seems impressive, until other verses with the same words are inspected that use the word sabbaton. We can look through the gospel accounts and see the phrase the first of the Sabbath, mian sabbaton, or proti sabbatu, is generally translated the first day of the week. For instance, Matthew 28, verse 1, the RSV says, now after the Sabbath, towards the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the sepulchre. This is referring to Jesus after he was crucified and was resurrected. And we see right there the Greek word used to translate week in pretty much every translation of the Bible is sabbaton. It says is mian sabbaton, the first day of the week, and it says after the Sabbath, the actual seventh day Sabbath day where they had a rest, it says sabbaton. Same word, but different meaning in different contexts. It's clearly not referring to the same day. Mark 16 verses 1 through 2 in the RSV, it says, and when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and the mother of Jesus and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, they went to the tomb when the sun had risen. And when it says the Sabbath has passed, it uses the word sabbatu, as you can see right here. And then when it's referring to the first day of the week, we see right here that it says, Kalian ro'ui tis mias sabbaton. So mia sabbaton means one Sabbath, or one Sabbath, the one Sabbath, which is translated by pretty much every Bible as something along the lines of the first day of the week. And then we see the same thing in Mark 16 verse 9, where it says he rose on the first day of the week. We see it translated as proti sabbatu. And then in Luke 24 verse 1, it says the first day of the week, and it's translated from the phrase miaton sabbaton. John 20 verse 1, it says, but now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene had come to the tomb, and that's translated from Di de mia ton sabbaton Maria y Magdalene. And so we see the same phrase, mia ton sabbaton. So for one day of Sabbath, which means first day of the week. And then we also see the same thing finally in John 20 verse 19, the first day of the week, translated from mia ton sabbaton. Since Christ rose on a Sunday and rested on the Sabbath in the tomb, these women were not coming on the Sabbath day since Christ had risen by this time, since they would be breaking the Sabbath essentially. We read in, also, this is probably the most convincing one, in Luke's account, the Pharisees fasted twice a week. I fasted twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. This is the Pharisee talking that Jesus records. The Greek of this actually has the word sabbatu in place of week, as we see right here. I use the word sabbatu, which means Sabbath. Now, did the Pharisees fast twice on the Sabbath or twice a week? The Jewish custom was to fast on Monday and Thursday, not two times on the same day. So, obviously, Sabbath can mean week. And you could go through all the instances by doing a search in the Bible up the word week or weeks and see that every time it appears in the New Testament, it's the word Sabbath. From my search, it appears that the Greek word for week, as used in the Septuagint, is not used in the New Testament. The Septuagint uses the word ibtho-madas, which I think is somewhat related to the word hepto, as in 7. I'm not sure why it's used that way. I have no clue about ancient Greek. Anyway, you can see it appeared right here in Daniel 10 verse 2, ibtho-madas, and then it says, and translated from the Net translation, it says, in those days I, Daniel, was in mourning for 3 weeks of days. And the Hebrew text actually reads, Shilosha Shavaim Yamim, where Shalosha means 3, and then Shavaim means 7s, and Yamim means days. So it says 3, so it's essentially referring to a three periods of 7 days. Every time any translation in the New Testament uses the word week, the word is always some form of sabbaton. The New Testament uses the same term for Sunday as found in Jewish literature of the first millennium. For instance, the Babylonian Talmud Tannit 29b, it reads, and here's the Hebrew text, and I will highlight it right here. To highlight the word Sabbath, shavat, shavat, and this is be'achad. Be'achad means 1, and shavat means in Sabbath, and hashshavat means the Sabbath. And you can go up over here and read it if you can read the text in the Babylonian Talmud. Anyway, the translation of this particular text says, should it fall on Sunday, and the Hebrew word for Sunday right there is be'achad shavat, which literally means in one of the Sabbath. It is permissible to wash clothes for the whole week, and the word for week there is actually translated from the word hashshavat, which means the Sabbath, or in this case, week, the week. But should it fall on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, before it is not permissible, but after it is permissible. Should it fall on Friday, it is permissible to wash clothes on Thursday in honor of the Sabbath. But anyway, you'll go through all the days of the week. They're actually just numbers. That's how they do it in Hebrew. This is particularly how they did it in Old Hebrew. Whereas modern Hebrew for Sunday, it would say Yom Rishon. But in those days, they say the first day. So anyway, should it fall on Sunday, it is permissible to wash clothes for the whole week. So anyway, it says be'achad, and then it says b'shavat. So obviously, shavat, even in the Talmud, means week. And then at the end of it, it says, at the end of the word shavat is used again when it says hashshavat, meaning the whole week, or the whole Sabbath. In this case, it means whole week. Whole Sabbath wouldn't make sense. And obviously, Jews did not wash clothes on the Sabbath day. Translators of the Talmud translate the phrase one of or in Sabbath as Sunday, just as the New Testament has always understood. So, when the Greek New Testament says mian sabbaton, it is the equal of the Hebrew Talmudic phrase be'achad be'shavat, where both texts read literally, or translate literally, one of the Sabbath to refer to Sunday, which is modern Hebrew is Yom Rishon. That's how it is even in the Genesis 1. It says Achad for the first day of the week. It doesn't say first, it says one day of the week. I don't know why, but that's how Hebrew Bible did it in Genesis. On this matter, John Lightfoot, a commentator and scholar on Judaism, particularly the Talmud in the 17th century, an Anglican cleric of the time, said this following statement, and you can check it out in his work, the Exercitations upon the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 28, verse 1, found on page 357, and you can check it out right here. And he goes through this phrase. He starts on the previous page with the Greek phrase, and it says, which is translated in the end of the Sabbath, and it says in the Jerusalem Talmud, it is Befaroki Sha'ova, in the coming forth of the Sabbath, vulgarly b'ma'atzari shavat, and certain outgoing. Then he goes on. Anyway, he goes to the relevant praise. Next paragraph, Aismian sabbaton, towards the first day of the week, the Jews reckoned the days of the week thus: achad b'shavat, one day, or the first day of the Sabbath; teri b'shavat, two, or the second day of the Sabbath. Two witnesses would come and say, באחד בשבת, which looks like it's more Aramaic. It says, the first of the Sabbath this man stole, and continuing, beteri b'shavat, on the second day of the Sabbath, judgment passed on him. I'm not sure exactly how that last one is pronounced. And then he goes on the next paragraph, Shiloshi b'shavat, the third of the week. A virgin is married on the fourth day of the week, for they provide for the feast. Achad b'shavat, the first day of the week. Sheni b'shavat, the second day of the week. Shiloshi b'shavat, and the third day of the week. Then it goes on and says, Beribya b'shavat, on the fourth day of the week, they set apart him who was to burn the red heifer. And then he goes on and says, בחמישי בשבת, on the fifth day of the Sabbath, Ezra ordained that they should read the law publicly on the second and fifth days of the Sabbath, and continuing, he appointed that judges should sit in the cities on the second and fifth days. Ezra also appointed that they should wash their clothes ba b'shavat, on the fifth day of the Sabbath. The sixth day they commonly called Erev hashshavat, the eve of the Sabbath, to wash their clothes on the fifth day of the Sabbath, and to eat onions on the eve of the Sabbath. Khamishi b'shavat, ve'erev shavat b'shevat, and the fifth day of the Sabbath, or week, and the eve of the Sabbath, and the Sabbath. The first day of the week, which is now changed into the Sabbath, or the Lord's Day, the Talmudists call Yom Notzli, the Christians, or the Christian Day. Yom Notzli Olam Asur, on the Christian's Day it is always forbidden for a Jew to traffic with a Christian. Where the gloss saith thus, Natzli, a Christian or a Nazarene, is he who follows in the error of that man who commanded them. And then it goes on, and you can read all about this. But anyway, he does make the mistake of referring to Sunday as the Sabbath, which was the case in some places. But remember, he's Anglican and not Catholic, and furthermore, it's not what the church fathers would have said on this matter. But anyway, this is Brahim Selassie, the Orthodox Catholic, and to show you that these Judaizers are wrong about how they translate the Bible in a particular way that no real translation ever does it. I've only seen maybe one out of maybe several dozen translations insist, oh, that maybe this is the Sabbath. It's ridiculous. Anyway, see ya.